I'm Dan Drake, back on Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. We have as our guest today Rick Atherton. Rick, welcome.
Thanks, Dan.
Rick
Happy to be here.
is a long-time Nantucketer and former chair of the Board of Selectmen, chair of the Finance Committee, now retired from his public service, but sort of sticking his nose back in it, right?
Well, I was able to get appointed to a couple of committees, and that's another way to keep
right.
involved a little bit.
Which ones are you on?
I'm on the Town Government Study Committee
We should talk.
and the Roads and Right-of-Way Committee, and both of which are of interest to me. So
right.
it was convenient and
Good. I didn't know you were on the Town Government Study Committee.
Yeah,
I should have known that, but I haven't had time to come to any of your meetings.
Well, you ought to come. We could use some participation
Well, I'd
and
love
input.
to, but that's a whole nother question.
Okay.
We'll deal with that later. You're here because you and Tobias Glidden have made a fairly bold proposal that you are putting on the agenda for the special town meeting in April. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, for the annual town meeting.
I'm sorry, annual town
that's
meeting,
all right,
excuse
yeah.
me, yeah.
I think both of us felt that the issues that initially came about, largely through the Surfside Crossing 40B application on South Shore Road, but affordable housing and all the related issues in general, often end up with a project that has a lot of density and sometimes has apartment type or condominium type building which add to density. And we're looking for a solution that gets around those problems. And I think the citizens have spoken to me anyway very clearly in the South Shore Road public hearings that that kind of development is not something they support. And so how do you get around it? What then do you do to help develop affordable housing? And as we thought about this was one way to do it, to simply ask the town to come up with the funds through the taxpayers and town meeting and buy existing housing units scattered any place that it's appropriate to buy them. And those can be added to the affordable housing, the so-called SHI list, so they're eligible. And if we buy, let's say, about 24 in a year, roughly you should get a year of safe harbor. And safe harbor would get us away from 40B projects like the South Shore Crossing.
But only for a year?
Only for a year. But we have a number of projects coming on board, and a lot of this is timing, Dan. So the 6 Fairgrounds Road project is tied up right now in litigation, and you don't know when that's going to come out. It might come out in 6 months and be approved and ready to count. And it has a number of units that would count towards safe harbor and ultimately the full 10% requirement. You don't know when the discussions, I think the Board of Selectmen are having with Richmond are come to some fruition, and that project will move forward more quickly. So all of those add to safe harbor and ultimately the right aggregate number, the 10% number.
What's the
town
shortage,
needs.
roughly?
Well, if all those come about, we're only down like 30 units from a number that's like 490. So take those as kind of round numbers. But that gives you a sense. That would include a certain number from an expected approval of South Shore, of Surfside Crossing, that could end up in litigation, so it may not come to fruition that quickly. That includes the units at 6 Surfside on the town property on Fairgrounds, not Surfside, 6 Fairgrounds. And that includes the units at Richmond. Those are the major contributors to get us from about 140 thereabouts today, very close to the 490. I think this article does a couple of things. It helps disperse units, and I think that's very important so that no one neighborhood can face the 40B project again. You know, frankly, I think the developers, Josh Posner and Jamie Feely, have done nobody a service. I mean, they claim it's for affordable housing, and certainly that's an element. But at the same time, the character of the neighborhood is at risk. And I for one, sympathize with those people. And I wouldn't want it to happen in Matticat or in Tom Nevers or other areas of the island. And there are possibilities all around the island for that kind of development.
Seems to be, this is my own observation, so you can pick it apart, but there seems to be a bias against apartments on Nantucket. Clearly, certain densities of apartments would help solve that problem by allowing more people in a smaller area. It doesn't have to be necessarily a whole huge development, but what
we do have, and I'm not the zoning code expert,
Right.
but we do have in the zoning code certain areas that are zoned to allow for apartment buildings. And I think they're limited to like 6 or 8 per building, so they're not one contiguous structure. But nevertheless, they are in effect apartments. And I think the area generally is the area around the Stop and Shop in Mid-Island. And you can see the units going up by community sailing. Those are
That's a dormitory.
That's a dormitory for season, but that building could be apartment
Right.
stand. So
Yeah,
that gives
right.
you a sense for the type of development that's possible. When 106 Surfside was in play as a 40B, you remember
Right,
that just
yes.
what, 3 or 4 years ago now, there were a lot of discussions. DJ McKinnon owns other land, some of which is leased to the Stop and Shop now. And this is between the Sea Grill and the Boys and Girls Club. That's a big plot of land. What's going to happen to that in the long term, who knows? There are parcels for sale across from the Stop and Shop, next to the auto body place, 2 lots there, all of which could be developed in this fashion if private developers want to step in. So it's not that we don't have them. There must be some other, maybe the value has been in single families, so that apartment developers haven't come forward. They were developing some apartments down on, what is it, Dave Street, I forget the name of the street, and Orange Street, almost across from Marine Home Center or across from the Landmark House. And I don't know what's happened to those units, but they might well be underway. They, in effect, were apartments at that location.
All right. Well, assuming that I agree. I understand what you're saying, and I think it's all right. But clearly, in order for a 40B project to be really workable from a developer standpoint, or for even the 6 Fairgrounds Road project to be workable from the town standpoint, and to have an independent private manager come in and run it, it is not just affordable housing. It's a mix of.
Well, I think when the town gets involved, because that's town property,
Right.
and in effect it's Sachem's Path, a lot of it was town property through the Housing
Right.
Authority, and subsidies are involved.
Right.
I mean, let's be clear about
Right.
that. And there was a lot of discussion when I was on the board and afterwards, before they finalized the approach to the project at Fairgrounds Road, how much of that would be affordable at what level, and how much could be reserved for town employees. All kinds of discussions have to take place. It's not an easy way to figure out the right mix and to make sure the numbers work so you can afford to pay the maintenance and upkeep the project after it's built. There are a lot of tax credits involved with the developers, so there's in effect a federal subsidy. You and I are paying that subsidy all the time.
Yeah.
So these concentrated 40Bs have a number of issues related to them.
I'm not advocating necessarily. I'm trying to figure out what makes that work versus something like such as you're proposing, or is there no parallel between the two whatsoever?
Well, I mean, there's a parallel between the town projects, but there's not a direct parallel to the 40B on South Shore Road. The developers there are going to make money off the market rate units, enough to apply any subsidy they need for the required units that will account for the affordable housing in the SHI list. So there's clearly a mix there. I think the problem many people have with the 40B law as it exists today is it's only 25% of the development.
Right.
That leaves 75% new market rate units, and they all require a certain percent to be of our total affordable. So if there were going to be 150 units there, what's 75% make up a number? 10% of that adds to the 490 we talked about earlier. If that number was 50%, I think that would be a better mix for the communities that are subject to 40Bs. And the developers wouldn't have the same incentive. They'd have to make a little bit less, perhaps, but they could still make money, Dan.
All right, let's talk about your proposal. $30 million
Yep.
to be raised by issuing bonds, presumably, paid off over 20 years, 10
Yeah,
years,
I mean,
10 years.
you know, we designed an article that really asks the Board of Selectmen to be responsible for the administration of the article. We're not trying to say, here are all the things. A number of people have said, Rick, you know, we need more information about some of the details. So how are you going to buy the units? Who's going to do this? How are you going to
You're
manage the
coming up with all
units?
my questions.
Well, I understand. And someone else said, gee, if you use that much money in the marketplace, are you going to usurp the private market? And nobody, if someone wanted to buy a house for $900,000 and the town was buying 100% of those available, is that what you want? So there's a fair amount of work that we have to do as this moves
do you know how
forward.
many houses there are on the market for, let's say, under $1 million now? It's a very low number.
Yeah, we'll get there. One of the numbers I was able to get before I came over to see you was that, I'm not sure what period of time, but in the past year, there were roughly, I think the number was 100, you know, I did write that down. It was like 100 units under $1.5 million. Now you can come back to $1 million and all
Well,
that.
I just
All that
sort of-
information's available.
Right.
And I think we'll, you know, Tobias is on vacation now. We'll pull together some of this information and make it available to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. And I think Tucker Holland, our housing specialist, has some time. He can help us with those numbers as well. Brian Sullivan, I think he's the chair now of the Affordable Housing Trust. He's a realtor. He has access to all the sale data. So we can pull that together and make sure people have it available.
Yeah, because I think in order to make an informed decision, the voters as well as the town needs that information.
That's
obviously.
right. On the other hand, I think part of this is a concept idea. You know, getting an article through town meeting is not easy, and getting the voters to approve the borrowing is not easy. But part of this can also be looked at almost as an insurance policy. If our other 40B or our other affordable housing projects, such as the ones we mentioned, are delayed for a long period of time, this would give the town the ability to act quickly and get another year of safe harbor before they come on board again. So that was just a thought another party had in talking to me about this, which made a lot of sense to me, Dan.
What about the ongoing management and administration? I know you said that it'd be up to the board to decide how it's run and so forth, which is fine. But in terms of maintenance,
You know, I think, for example,
these will all be rental units, I assume.
the idea is that's certainly my idea.
Right.
In a perfect world, we'd buy them from seasonal or investors, convert them to year-round, and they'd all be rental units. And perhaps in 15 or 20 years, we may not need them. And if we could work out a deal with the state, maybe at the end of 20 years they could be sold and the money reinvested in some other way or pay off the bonds. But it seems to me there are already a lot of property managers on the island. They may or may not be helpful in terms of managing these units. We do have, the town has hired a professional property manager to run the units at 6 fairgrounds. That party might well be someone who could step up and help us with these 30 units. So it's not, I don't want the town, I mean, it's not so much me, I don't think the town wants to be in the management business,
Right.
just as they're not in the management business at fairgrounds. So I think there are opportunities. If these folks don't
But these
work
will
out-
be directly owned by the town.
well, or by an entity. It doesn't have to be the town. It could be the Affordable Housing Trust. Could be we set up a new entity. That's in effect the town. But that's a...
How are the ones at Fairgrounds owned?
The fairgrounds,
proposed-
there's a land lease. The town owns the land. They're leasing to the developer manager, and he's coming up with the money to build the units, which
Right.
includes tax credits and all of that
Yeah.
financing stuff. And he will intend to manage them over the long term. That same party manages Academy Hill right now, Dan. So he's on the island.
Is there anything else at this point we should know?
Well, you know, I think one of the things we need to focus on is that this is a possible solution that meets a lot of the problems we've faced. And when you're building units from scratch on land, it takes a long time. And they're not dispersed. They tend to be concentrated. So whether people like it or not, the people across from the Fairgrounds Road decided that was an intrusion in their neighborhood. Now, a lot of people disagree with that. They've been planned for a long time and all those issues. But nevertheless, I think that concern has been expressed. And this was developed, at least from my point of view, in a response to that.
If Surfside Crossing is tied up in litigation, and which could happen, and Six Fairgrounds continues to be tied up in litigation, what happens after a year?
Well, we're going to be subject to other 40B applications. And if you look, for example, at the presentation by the Affordable Housing Trust, when they made a request for a $3 million article at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, they listed, 5 or 6 parcels of land. So if they were available for about that price for affordable housing possibilities, they're also available for 40B possibilities. So without looking very far, we can see where other developments might occur. And they could well end up be designed something like the Surfside Crossing project, with apartments and affordable sections and other parts to them. So
this will first go to the Finance Committee next week, or this week?
Actually, the Finance Committee's first public hearing is tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
How much of a discussion they really have at the public hearing, I'm not sure. When I was on, you had a number of people show up with a lot of articles, so you didn't have a lot of discussion. You sort of had a brief presentation. And then later in their process, they'll set up a schedule, usually so people know when to show
So you don't have a real read yet of how either the FinCom or the Board of Selectmen
I don't.
feel
You know,
about this.
what I do have a read in, I always liked it when I was on the Board of Selectmen to go to the Stop and Shop, because people will approach you and they have a comment. And, well, maybe those who feel differently haven't come forward. Most people I've talked to feel this is an idea that its time has come, it's a good idea. We need to actively consider it in a positive way, not a negative way. There are details to be worked out, but I think there's real support amongst a broad group of people that this deserves a positive approach. So we'll see what happens.
On that note, Rick Atherton,
All right.
thank you,
Dan?
and good luck with your project.
Happy to be here.